Okay, hello everyone. Well, we finally come to Singapore, right? And I hope that you will learn something new today for this lecture, okay? Okay, so what's the focus for this case study? Well, Singapore is very different from the other case studies that we have learned so far, even starting from the very beginning, okay? Because Singapore did not undergo phase one, okay? So simply put, all right, it meant that we did not even experience a period whereby there was a party-based politics in a democratic setting. So when we became independent, right, we kind of immediately went into a single party state or a one party state from the very beginning. Okay, so therefore I guess it's a matter of like we don't know what we have missed. Okay, so it might be a good thing. Okay, so what are we using Singapore for then? Right? Because Singapore is a maximum government as a controlled democracy, okay, not really like an authoritarian government lah, okay, but controlled democracy, okay. Singapore will be positioned as another positive case study, okay. So far, Suharto's Indonesia, okay, has been a positive case study, okay. So Singapore will be our next one, all right, another very positive case study as a maximum government, okay. So again, we have these three criterion, and yeah, you will be able to see lah, like how Singapore represents like a positive case study. So with regards to the ability to suppress centrifugal threats, right? Basically, it's about how PAP used the ISA, okay, to diminish the power of the Barisan Socialists. So that would be a so-called like communist equivalent in the context of Singapore. We don't have popular protests, okay, after the 1969 KL riots, the 1969 racial riots, okay, in Singapore, okay, and so far, we also don't have any example of like the popular opposition, okay. The best, all right, the closest we can say, all right, would be the biggest challenge for PAP then, okay. It was like their worst nightmare come true, okay. So it was the decline in popular votes for the PAP in the 1980s. So it is still the same period lah, okay, 1980s, okay, same with regards to like the wave of popular protests and uprising all over Southeast Asia. But in Singapore, we have another version because we always want to be different. Okay, so the next criterion, right, is about the ability to gain legitimacy through democratic forms and practices. Again, is a positive case study. All right, so therefore, we do see that on one hand, there was still a commitment to political opposition, all right, sharing of power, okay, and also political reforms, okay, in order to maintain stability and hold on to power. But there are also some limitations. So there are also like some underhanded methods, okay, used by the PAP government, okay, to remain in power using criterion 2. Now, of course, criterion 3, I mean, yeah, we're in Singapore. So obviously, when we talk about, society, economy, we should be a positive case study, right? Okay, so let's start. All right, looking at the very beginning. So this one is before full self-rule. So it's like not technically, relevant. Okay, because this what happens before we were given independence. But this will give you a sense of like the kind of chaos and instability that Singapore will have experienced if we just continue in this vein. Okay, so in the period immediately after World War II. Okay, so there was this mass period of like decolonization and Singapore was still technically under the British rule. Okay, the British introduced this thing called open politics. So whereby the British just allowed any political party, all right, to be formed, okay, even communist ones. Okay, so therefore, this period has actually brought about a lot of chaos. Okay, and we also see the rise of like radical parties, like socialist parties, left-wing parties, and apparently these socialist parties and left-wing parties, they were more popular. Okay, enjoyed more popular support, all right, than the elitist ones, right, the conservative parties, the right-wing, pro-British, elitist parties. Okay, even PAP itself, all right, even Lee Kuan Yew himself, okay, in their rise to power, all right, in their attempt to want to gain more popular support, right, they also exploited the popularity of the more radical socialist members of the PAP, okay, to challenge the leadership of David Marshall's Singapore Labour Front, okay, from the period 1955 to 1959. So it was after the PAP managed to overtake all right, or win the SLF, right, in the 1959 election, right, that's when PAP came to power and formed the government, and the rest is, as we call it, history. Okay, so therefore, even in their rise to power, right, PAP also had to like, work with the so-called left wing or the leftist members, right. This suggests the importance of wanting to use the communists lah, or the so-called left wing members, okay, in order to gain popular support. Okay, so therefore, that's what I've mentioned, all right? So this early period before we gain full self-government and independence, right? It was very chaotic. Okay, there were a lot of strikes, a lot of demonstration, a lot of political parties, were formed and all that, all right? So this is something that I've mentioned earlier as well. Okay, and at the same time, okay, that we also see a very politicized student body. Okay, so at that point in time, I think it's like, you know, a legacy of Japanese occupation, because during JO, right, you know, education was halted, obviously. Okay, so therefore after JO, right, there were a lot of like very mature students, okay, going back to high school. Okay, so they're probably in their 20s or and whatnot lah. And then these very mature students in schools, okay, they because they're very mature, right? So therefore they are therefore very diligent. So finish their tutorials, finish their work very fast, and they were able to be involved in like radical activities like organizing themselves and championing various causes. Okay, so at that point in time, especially in Chinese schools, okay, they became very politicized, right? So therefore they will like, you know, take up causes, you know, and then they will go and demonstrate, and they'll go and like, yeah, show off their unhappiness and whatever lah. So therefore the students themselves, okay, they can potentially be a very real threat, right, to the government as well. Okay, so therefore, yes, you can see that these are pictures of so-called popular protests, okay, in the context of Singapore. But the fact that they are so dated, okay, and then the costumes, like the clothes that they are wearing, okay, they are so dated as well, suggests that this is another a far gone era, all right. Probably we have not kind of witnessed it, you know, in our generation, and probably might not be, I'm not sure. Okay, but these were the good old days, okay, of student demonstrations and stuff. So therefore, just to show you that like Singapore was happening once as well. Okay, so finally it went to full self-rule, all right? So we don't have to know about like the politics of like how Singapore got power and stuff like that. So that's not part of the syllabus, all right? So therefore you just have to know that, you know, from actually it's 1959, all right, 1959 onwards. Okay, so let me just change it. Right, so from 1959, that's when we gained the period of full self-government, right? PAP already became the ruling party, okay? And then at a point in time, Singapore had already decided to opt for tough, paternalistic, monolithic, no-nonsense maximum government, okay? Because there are so many threats facing Singapore that no choice, okay? They have to, you know, govern with an iron fist, right? And what's worse, okay, the very tense period, okay, a fractious period, okay, from 1963 to 65. That's when the merger and separation took place, okay, between Singapore and Malaysia. Okay, also confirmed the need for maximum government, because there are a lot of people who cannot agree, all right, whether it is in Malaysia or even in Singapore itself, all right, whether we should continue to be part of Malaysia, or whether we should you know, be separated, and then if we're separated, on what grounds and what kind of Singapore we will become. So there are a lot of like differences, okay, and then at the same time there were also like, you know, racial riots that were happening in Singapore lah. Okay, so there are basically two, right? Okay, so that's why yeah, this shows that there are really a lot of potential for instability, okay, for centrifugal threats, all right, that necessitated the need for maximum government. Okay, so after we have been separated, or we have been unceremoniously kicked out of Malaysia, okay, in 1965, it is even more imperative for our survival, all right, because we are a very small country. No one expected us to be able to survive lah. Yeah, so as to speak, really is kind of a very well established fact. Okay, we were like the miracle that no one thought would happen. Okay, so therefore, there are a lot of challenges facing the PAP government at that point in time. Okay, so there are a lot of the very negative prevailing conditions, and we also have to survive against all odds. So therefore, the PAP government had to ensure a high degree of political stability, because otherwise we won't have investors coming in, and then our country just will not be able to survive. All right, and this is the evidence lah, to show that we are one party state, because basically we have elections, all right, so that's why we are still a democracy, okay, and these elections are not the Marcos style of elections, they are like not fake, okay, but the people just love the PAP, okay, so all of them in once, twice, three times, four times, all right, voted for PAP, okay, and PAP captured all the seats in parliament, so they're all one big happy family, and therefore it is a one party state, or a single party state, and therefore controlled democracy. Okay, the elections are generally fair, all right, so it's not like fraudulent, okay, so few restrictions and no explicit rules to you know, limit the power of the political opposition, okay. However, there are a lot of limitations. All right, so you might have heard about something like this, all right, when you read, you know, things online and stuff, all right, this thing called gerrymandering. So basically, gerrymandering means that the authorities in power, okay, the ruling authorities in power, they would actually use this thing called the drawing of the electoral boundaries, all right, to manipulate the boundaries such that, you know, such that they will be able to create you know, an electorate, right, that would vote majority in their favor. Okay, so therefore this one, I think this one is from a US side. You can just read lah. Okay, you see that how, because of gerrymandering, right, the anyhow drawing of political boundaries, right, they will be able to make red win, even though red represents only 40%, okay, of the population. But because of how they draw, okay, in a very funny way, all right, the districts. Okay, so we have examples in Singapore as well. Okay, so basically it's about, you know, if a particular constituency has shown to be not so pro PAP, you will not see them again in the next elections. Okay, right? So I guess it's kind of like open joke in Singapore as well. I mean, even SGAT also talks about that, right? And yeah, but this probably will not be so obvious in recent years. Okay, so that would be the first limitation. Okay, so the second limitation would be the depoliticization of religious groups. Okay, so this is actually another what do you call it, characteristic of maximum government, right? So basically it is to make the people very passive. So therefore there are no like issues that will like irritate them or like, you know, motivate them to rise up, okay, to like champion or something. All right, so therefore because Singapore is a multi-racial society, okay, so therefore this is like a hot button issue. So we have to make sure that issues of like religion, okay, they are very sensitive, and race as well, because they're kind of tied together, right? Okay, they're very sensitive and they have to be very carefully managed. Okay, so we have a few structures in place, okay, to ensure racial harmony. Okay, so Article 89 of the Constitution, okay, highlighting the special position of the Malays. We also have the Maintenance of Religious Harmony Act, MRHA of 1990. Okay, so basically it's about religious groups not allowed to interfere with politics. So there's a very clear separation between like politics and religion. And we also have a Sedition Act. So Malaysia have, I think this is like a British legacy. All right, so this is our version, another legacy from the British, the colonial powers. So basically we have a Sedition Act as well. Okay, so all this, okay, would maintain stability because we would be able to control how people talk about, you know, race and religion, right, and limit the ability of them using race and religion to like stir up problem. Okay, so this is a summary of what the MRHA is all about. Okay, so it is an elected one, elected what do you call it, elected council, okay, presidential council for religious harmony. Okay, and then they're all like very prestigious members and representing different religions and stuff. Okay, so this is not an example of democracy, okay, because they're not elected, they are appointed. They are appointed by president or something. All right, so therefore, and they have a lot of powers, right? They are allowed to issue a restraining order against anyone, okay, if you cause ill feeling between different religious groups. Okay, so a third limitation is something that we are very familiar with, okay, the NCMP and the NMP schemes. So basically, the NCMP scheme is so-called like the biggest loser scheme. I don't know whether you have heard about that before. So it's about the you know, the contestant, all right, candidate who lost with the smallest margin of votes, all right, in that general election, okay, would be the top two lah, the top two biggest losers, so as to speak, okay, would be offered a seat, all right, in parliament as an NCMP. Okay, so therefore this is PAP's concession, okay, to allow opposition voices on their own grounds. Okay, because an NCMP is still not a full MP, so they are allowed to debate on issues and even vote on some, but they don't have the full powers of the MPs, and of course they don't represent their constituency because they don't have any, right? Okay, so that's why the opposition still thinks that this is just tokenistic. We also have this thing called the NMP scheme, the nominated members of parliament. So I think this is somewhat similar to like, you know, in the maximum government we also have such examples of functional groups, functional interest groups, like Sukarno's, like in Sukarno's Indonesia. The Golkar Party in Suharto's Indonesia also originally started as an interest group as well, or a functional group. Okay, so you can see from the NMP, right, these people, they represent all walks of life, from like you know, this one is like the what, Chinese orchestra, Singapore Chinese Orchestra, and of course Yip Pin Xiu represents, you know, sports. Okay, and we have like social work, and we have like from economics or like academics and stuff like that. Okay, or like animal welfare, whatever lah. So they represent different interest groups, and so this PAP's attempt, right, to like represent like a diverse voices lah, okay, in parliament. But of course they are not democratically elected, okay, so therefore they still don't have the whole sway of powers, all right, given to them by the people lah, okay, if they are like fully elected MPs. Okay, so this is something that you're also very familiar with, the GRCs. All right, so the PAP justified it by saying that that's the only way they could actually ensure that there would be minority representation in parliament. Okay, so therefore by having GRCs, okay, multiracialism was legislated into the political structure. So to us, it become like a given. Okay, but it's actually an artificial construct. Okay, because yeah, it's not a given for this. All right, I think it is somewhat similar to the Barisan Socialists as well. All right, so the Barisan Socialists is also a coalition of different political parties. Okay, there are also like different, like for example, the Chinese MCA, all right, and MIC they're also in the Barisan Socialists, right? So therefore, that's how they also represent, able to have like different voices in the same party. Okay, so this is Singapore's attempt to do something similar. All right. On the other hand, okay, opposition also accused the PAP government, okay, of purposely coming up with GRCs, all right, to raise the bar, okay, to make it more difficult, for the opposition to find 3 or 4 or even 5 or even 6, okay, worthy candidates, okay, plus must find minorities some more, okay, and they are equally capable, okay, to field a GRC. Okay, so this will also point to the further development of maximum government. All right, so this will be the GRCs of today. And I think, after many years, okay, all right, so let's see. Okay, the GRC scheme started in 1988. So after, in the previous 2 elections, or actually in the previous last election now, the opposition Workers' Party finally broke the stalemate. They captured not only just one, okay, the originate GRC, but the second one, the Sengkang GRC. So therefore showing that it's not like, impossible, okay, but they took, I don't know how many years, you are going to count yourself, like 30, 40 years, all right, in order for them to achieve it. Okay, like opposition able to win a GRC. Okay, so basically limitation 1, 2, 3, 4, as I've said earlier, they represent state sponsored. So this means that it's controlled by the government. All right, so the government give the concessions, all right, for diverse voices. And so therefore they are the one who control the parameters of such discussion. Okay, and therefore this would reduce the need for formal opposition, okay, that might challenge the authority of the government. Okay, so therefore, yes, the stormtroopers are very happy. Okay, so next, let's look at Lee Kuan Yew himself. All right, so therefore Lee Kuan Yew alone himself, all right, deserves a criterion to all of his own. Okay, so basically, let's look at how Lee Kuan Yew, as a very capable leader, single-handedly created this structure, okay, of maximum government in Singapore. Okay, not very single-handedly, he has a bunch of very, very capable and loyal cadres, okay, to help him and support him. Okay, yeah, so this would be in an overview of what he has done. Our Prime Minister for 30 years, and we were architect of our political system, and generated our economic strategy, and allowed us to leap from third world to the first in 1 generation. So am I talking about NE stuff now? Okay, so let's look at Lee Kuan Yew in detail. All right, so this would be like his foreign policy orientation. He's pro-US, informally aligned the US and Britain throughout the Cold War. Okay, however, internally, okay, so he also took a very harsh approach, all right, towards any leftist elements or communist elements. Okay, and at the same time, he was also very interventionist and paternalistic. So even though he was pro-US or pro-Western inclination, right, but that doesn't mean that he fully subscribed to Western ideals of democracy. All right, he still believed that in Singapore he needed that. Yeah, Singaporeans needed to be ruled with an iron fist. Okay, so what were some of Lee Kuan Yew's strategies to form a maximum government and to maintain stability? So we have this thing called the ISA, Internal Security Act. It's still in place today, all right? But I think the ISA is mostly used to deal with terrorists now. Okay, we have the very infamous Operation Cold Storm in 1963. So basically, this was the operation, all right, that that led to the death of Barisan Socialists, or the end of Barisan Socialists, because basically with this Operation Cold Storm, right, it was a crackdown against the Barisan Socialists. Okay, and many of the leaders were arrested. Okay, and they were not able to participate in the upcoming elections. Yeah, and then so far Barisan Socialists kind of lost power. Okay, yeah, and they eventually defeated in the 1963 elections. Okay, so this would be in big soup, arrested 107 people. Okay, there is a link between the Operation Cold Store, right, with something that we're going to learn about next year, okay, which is interstate tensions, all right, which is also about konfrontasi, okay, and there was this thing called the Brunei Revolt, all right, in the konfrontasi period, whereby it is about, you know, some left-wing elements in Brunei, all right, coming out of the revolt demonstrations, okay, to convince or to revolt against the possibility of Brunei joining Malaysia and Singapore to form a bigger Malaysia than what happened or what was formed in 1963. Okay, so obviously the Brunei Revolt was very easily suppressed, stamped down. Okay, but apparently there have been some sympathizers from Singapore as well. Okay, towards this Brunei Revolt. Okay, and then Singapore, the government used this opportunity to arrest these left wing members. Okay, because they supported the Brunei Revolt. Okay, so this is a very short video. Yeah, it's a little bit propaganda because they're saying that, well, we need to do this because it's to justify the good life that we're doing now and stuff. But I wanted to show you this video not because I want to spread propaganda, but because I wanted to let you have a sense of like the kind of politics, what kind of situation, what life was like, all right, in Singapore in the 1960s. so that would be the Operation Cold Store, and it's also really to share with you that yes, there had been indeed a real communist threat, all right, at a point in Singapore, okay, but it has not developed to a point of like an insurgency like during the Malay emergency kind of thing. Okay, but definitely we have left-wing members, okay, and a left-wing political party, all right, and even the trade unions, student bodies, they also have been radicalized. Okay, so these were some very serious threats, right, that the PAB government had to like address and kind of like exterminate, okay, if they want to like maintain in power. Okay, so that would be how Lee Kuan Yew used ISA to step up his opposition, okay, and also centrifugal threats, right? And his own leadership and no nonsense style of governance. So I think this is something that we are very familiar with as well. Commitment to rule of law. We don't have the corruption and cronyism that we do see in other countries in Southeast Asia, for example. Okay. All right, and so therefore, we will continue in the next lecture, all right, with regards to other strategies that the Singapore government had put in place, okay, to maintain stability.